Yeah. There's 10 families and everybody, there's always a minyan, 11 families. You're right, because everybody always relies on everybody else. Okay, good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Again, sorry about the lateness. We're starting late, but we're hopefully going to say some good stuff that'll make it worthwhile. Okay. Let's have a look at this. Let's start with the following. A very interesting idea I saw from Rabbi Zev Leff. Rabbi Zev Leff is a rabbi who was originally from Miami, or he was originally really from, I think, from Cleveland, then via Miami, and now has been the Rav in Eretz Yisrael for many, many years. And it's actually, he's got very, very interesting things to say about all sorts. And we're going to read the following verse tonight. We're on page 346 if you got an Art Scroll Chumash, and we're in chapter 2, verse 1. Chapter 11, verse 1. I was thinking verse 2. Yeah. 11, verse 1. Hashem said to Moshe, we're page 346, again, 11, verse 1. Hashem says to Moshe, there's one more plague that I will bring upon Paro and Mitzrayim. After that, he will send you away from here. When he sends forth, it shall be complete, meaning he will drive you out of here. He will not ask you to come back, none of that. And then it continues, please speak to the Jewish people. And they should borrow a man from his friend, and a woman from her neighbor, from her friend, silver and gold vessels. Now if you look later on in the Pasuk, Hi Shlomo, those that, if you look later on in the Pasuk, it says actually not only should they borrow the gold and the silver, but rather they should also borrow usmolos, also articles of clothing. So it's interesting. Why would they now be borrowing the articles of clothing? We know that the Midrash tells us that there are three things that the Jewish people did that allowed them to go free. They did not change their name, they did not change their clothes, and they did not change their language. Right? There are those that make fun of it, and they say, well, look, you could be called Yankel, and you could speak Yiddish, and you could wear a frock, and you could still be sunken into the depths of the Tumah and the depths of the impurity in Egypt. Even with the Yiddish, and even with the name, and even with all the clothes. That's not what it is. But there are others that make the point and say, and this is what Rabbi Leff says, I don't understand. If we say they never changed their clothing, now as they're leaving Egypt, suddenly now we're borrowing their clothes. That doesn't need to make any sense. A whole time you didn't do it, and now suddenly you do it. Sounds weird. So, Rav Leff says a very interesting point, and I think a very, very important point. And the point that he makes is the following. He says, we have to understand sometimes, hey Rav Moshe, we have to understand that sometimes there are things that are 100% okay, even though people don't really look at them as being okay, but they are. There's nothing wrong with them. However, as long as we give it a boundary, we give it a limit. Let me give you an example. We'll take different examples. Take football, for example. Right? Is there anything per se wrong with football? Obviously not. There are those people that are very, very intense, and they'll tell you, well, you know what, you shouldn't be watching football, and it's wrong, and it's a whole bunch of, it's 22 people running after a piece of leather, and they don't know. Anybody who's ever played the sport knows it's great. It's great fun. It's a great thing to do. It gives the kids an outlet. It gives them a way to, even for adults. And nowadays, even for people that are, sadly, they're overweight, or they have heart issues, etc., they have something called walking football. Have you seen that? Yeah? You see posters for it. There's walking football. So that you don't only have to play football when you're running, you can play football when you're walking. Yeah. It's all great. And there's nothing wrong. Football is a wonderful thing. But if football becomes a way of life, if football becomes a religion, it becomes something that you cannot manage without, that's when you start having the problem. Yeah?
And also, it's part of the way the footballers behave as well.
Well, okay, that for sure. There's that behavior as well.
In their private lives.
Pardon?
In their private lives, it's not so admirable.
Yeah, well, that's true. Is that, your type of football? What's your type of football, Shlomo? But I'm sure there's I don't know what it is, what makes them behave in a certain way, but they just do. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And we're not, okay. Yeah. And we're not proud of the way some of them behave, and some of them behave very, very nicely. But I'm not even talking about their behavior, because that's not really the main point. The main point to be made over here is, does it turn into your religion? Does it turn into the thing that makes you tick, that everything works around your football? Your whole life revolves just around that. Yeah. Why are they called fans? What does fan come from?
Fanatics.
That's right. A fan is actually a fanatic. A fan is somebody who is fanatic. A fanatic is somebody who's crazy. He overdoes things to excess, right? So football is not bad per se, but if you're going to take football and you're going to mangle it and use it in the wrong way, and it's going to turn into your life and it's going to take over your life, then you have a problem. Clothes. Some people, you got to wear clothes. You go and you buy clothes. For some people, clothing is like it becomes an obsession.
Fashion, right? Keeping up with the fashion.
Keeping up with the fashion. And sometimes you see people, they're wearing certain stuff, and I look at them, and we all look at them, and you say to yourself, what are you wearing? But nobody wants to say anything, because I know that's the newest fashion in Paris. What should I do? I can't help it. That's how they dress. So they'll tell you, I mean, this is the greatest, newest thing.
Next season, fashion is skirts for men, by the way. So.
Skirts for men, next season's fashion. I'm not buying that one. You know what I mean?
Can you wear them with trousers?
Do you know what? I must tell you, in my life, I think I've probably worn a skirt twice or three times on Purim, and I was 11 years old when I wore that, or 12 years old, and I was on my way to shul, and I still remember it like yesterday. I was on my way to shul, and it was freezing, it was biting cold out. And I came to shul. On the way to shul, my father had to take me into a shop. We had to buy tights. That's how bad it was. I was like so embarrassed. I mean, this lady's shop buying tights, and this boy in a skirt. All right, whatever. I was dressed up as a Scottishman. I wasn't even dressed up as a woman. I dressed up as a Scot. I got a tartan skirt and everything. But, it was so cold. And I couldn't imagine. I said to myself, I came home, I said to my mother, and I said to my sisters, I don't know how you do this. I'm a guy and I'm freezing. I don't know how they manage. And sometimes you see, especially, I don't know what it is about the school. Is you see the schools, and they have the girls, so the girls wear these skirts, but they're like mini skirts, and you see them walking in the winter. They're not even wearing tights. They're wearing these ankle socks and these skirts that just about make it about, 3 inches below where they need to go. And it's just absolutely, you look at it and you're like, how aren't you freezing wearing this? For the people that turn it into an obsession, it's all about, do you know what I mean? It's all about how I look, and I need the newest this, and whether I can afford it, whether I can't afford it becomes my obsession, becomes a thing I have to do. I have to have this. So Rav Leff says a very amazing point. He says, you know what? God was telling the Jewish people something. He was saying, if you want to wear clothing that the Egyptian people wear, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with Egyptian clothing. But if you wear Egyptian clothing and become Egyptian because of it, then you got it wrong. That's what you have to realize. It's important to know that we can wear things that the rest of the world wear. We don't have to wear, there are those, I'll say, and for that reason, the Hasidim, for example, say, we are not going to wear the clothes that the outside world wears. We wear something to isolate ourselves, to insulate ourselves from the rest of the world. And there are those people, there are those views of doing this, right? However, but even if you say, well, no, that's not my way of looking at things, fine. So I dress like everybody else. But I don't want to dress like everybody else to become like everybody else. I dress like everybody else because that is how a person dresses in society. I wear what I wear, so I wear a suit because in society people wear a suit. So if I wore something else, everybody would look at me and Rabbi, well, why aren't you wearing a suit? But if I said to myself, I want to wear a suit so that I fit in with everybody, I'm not wearing a suit to fit in with everybody. Not to, I don't want to become everybody else. And that's why he's saying, now that you're leaving Egypt, now that we know that you can wear those clothing without mimicking the Egyptian ways, now it's okay for you to have that clothing. That's the first point that they point out over here. Rav Hirsch says something else also, which is great. Rav Hirsch says, please speak to the people. What do you mean, please speak to the people? Why are we saying please? What's this please? Daber Nobe is now verse 2. So says Rav Hirsch, imagine what happened before this. You know what happened? What was the last plague before the plague of the firstborn? What was the plague right before the plague of the firstborn? Number 9. No, right after locust? Right after locust? Darkness. Yeah, darkness. The plague of darkness was the plague that now was plaguing the Egyptians. And what happened during the plague of darkness? During the plague of darkness, the Egyptian people for 3 days couldn't see each other, and for 3 days they couldn't even move. So now in those 3 days where the Egyptians couldn't move, the Jewish people went and they could take advantage of the Egyptians to their heart content. Yeah? Imagine if everybody suddenly was stationary. You walked into the bank and everybody suddenly froze. And you had 10 minutes to do whatever you wanted to in the bank. Right? Now, I'm sure this august crowd over here would never do anything wrong. But there are plenty of people that would say to themselves, 10 minutes, everyone's frozen in time. You walk over to one person, you take his checkbook. You walk over to the next lady, you take her purse from her. It's got money in it. It's got credit cards in it. That's beautiful. It's got her license, driving license in it. You can cause all sorts of havoc. You go to a third person, you just pulled out cash, who's about to pull the cash out of the ATM, out of the cash machine. Thank you very much. You walk out with that. You walk out of the bank, everybody's frozen in time. You walk out of the bank with 5,000 pounds in your pocket. Quickly get into your car, drive off. Nobody knows. Nobody saw anything. Then everybody gets into movement, and this woman goes, that's weird. Felt like time stood still. Let me just get my money out. And she looks inside her pocketbook, and it's missing. Her purse is missing. Where'd my purse go? And the other guy, he's like, all right, I'm going to take my money. Sworn he checks his balance. Oh, it's gone. He checks, he can't even take out another 250 pounds today because he's taken up to the limit on his card, whatever the limit on his card was. And everyone's like, what was that all about? Somebody must have come in here when we were all stuck and taken everything. So imagine how the Egyptians knew they were stuck. And they hear the Jews in the background. And finally, it finishes. The plague finishes. And we are now up to the point where they're all moving again. And now that they're all moving again, every person says, I heard Jewish people in my house. Quickly, let's go to the safe. You open up the safe. Every penny's there. They must have taken some jewelry. So you open up the drawer with all the jewelry, the necklaces, the bracelets, whatever it is, everything is still there. So they must have taken some clothes. So you go and you open up your expensive closet with all your Armani suits, and every single one of them is there. And all your shoes and all of your wife's shoes, everything is there. And you say to yourself, what was that all about? The Jews came, walked into our house, could have taken anything. And there wasn't only one or two Jews, there were millions. They could have gone into everybody's drawers. They could have gone and stolen whatever they wanted.
Some of them must have done because only 20% came out.
Right, but that doesn't mean that some of them stole. It seems that they didn't. We don't read. I don't know. I think what's going on, they weren't given. No, so it's interesting. So that we're getting to. We'll get to this in a minute. So could you imagine the esteem? Imagine if you were an Egyptian and you'd look through your entire house. And after you've looked through your entire house and you think to yourself, they must have taken something. I find they have not taken a single thing. Not one. You say to yourself, they've not taken a single thing? 3 days of darkness and not one penny is missing in my house? What feeling do you think that's going to give the Egyptians about the Jews?
A good feeling.
Yeah? Trusting. They've now Imagine the esteem that they must have held the Jews in now. Imagine how they looked at the Jews. They said to these Jews, I cannot believe these Jews. I can't believe that they did all of this. They could take whatever they want to do, and they took zero. So they've made a massive Kiddush Hashem now. And now God's saying to them, okay, and now that Makas Bechoros is coming, now that the plague of the firstborn is coming, I want you to go in, and I want you to ask your neighbors for gold and for silver. What's that going to do to the entire operation? What's that going to do to the entire Kiddush Hashem that was created just a few days ago? It's going to ruin it, right? It's going to be like, oh, they didn't take it now. They'll take it later, right? They didn't want to take it because they couldn't take it at the time. But now they're coming and now they're asking for it. So they're not as good as I thought they were. So Jewish people might say, I don't want to do this. I've made this amazing Kiddush Hashem. How can I now go and ruin this Kiddush Hashem that I've done? How can I go and I will ruin everything that I've worked for those 3 days, holding myself back, not taking a single penny? Says Hashem, I'll ask you, please, I understand. It's upsetting. Imagine you held yourself back for so long. You go, so imagine, you go to Kiddush, if you have anybody have been on a diet?
No.
You go, no? Elliot, never been on a diet?
No.
Amazing. Have you always been thin? Or have you always been watching your weight?
I went for a medical this week.
Yes.
My wife always gives me a nice meal.
Yes.
And she complains that I eat too much. She thinks I eat a lot more than other people of my age.
All right.
So I went for the medical.
Yeah.
Various things. I said to the doctor, I mentioned that. I said, my wife thinks I eat too much. And
Yeah.
she burst out laughing. You eat too much.
Look at you,
It's so
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, but there are plenty of us that have that issue, that we struggle with our weight. Imagine you go to Kiddush. Sometimes I find this really annoying. You go to Kiddush, and it's a great Kiddush, and you say to yourself, man, I'm in Kugel and Shalom. I know if I start on Kugel and Shalom, it's 2 or 3 bowls minimum, and finally you get home, and you're good. Pardon? I'm making you hungry, I'm sorry. Right? Finally you get home, you're like, oh, I'm home. And your wife goes, all right, sit down, we're going to have a meal. Can I give you, before we start, I bought a special ice cream dessert for you. And you go for the entire ice cream. And you're like, oh. Now, after I held myself back at 4 Kiddushes, I said to myself, I'm not eating anything, I'm not getting any weight. I don't want to eat anything, I'm not going to get weight. Ice cream. Yeah. It's like the whole thing. Then you said, for that price, I could have eaten at the Kiddushes already. I didn't have to drive myself crazy and hold myself back not to eat. Could have had my kugel and cholent, I could have had better cake. Now I had this rubbish ice cream. The ice cream wasn't even that good. I could have had really good cake. I could have had better stuff there. Yeah, you ruin the entire thing. We're ruining everything. So that the Jewish people say, well, you're ruining everything. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm asking you, please do me a favor. I want you to take things anyway. And therefore, I'm asking you to take things even if it goes against your principles. Even if you held yourself back for so long, this time I'm asking you to take something anyway. That is what Rav Hirsch says now about this. But
they didn't just say, they asked.
Yes, they did ask, but they never ended up giving back. And people might have thought to themselves, well, these Jews. Yeah? Yeah, I don't know what they thought. Yeah? But it's interesting now. I want to show you one more thing. I think we're going to finish with this. A very interesting piece at the end of the Parasha, or towards the end of the Parasha. In this week's Seder, we read about 3 of the 4 sons that are mentioned in the Haggadah. The sons that are mentioned in the Haggadah are not mentioned as sons specifically. We say, it will be when your children say to you, but we don't say this is the Chacham, this is the Rasha, etc., etc. So if you look at, in this week's Parasha, you will find it in Perak Yud Beis Pasuk Chavav, chapter 12, verse 26. Page 356, 357, correct. 356 in the Hebrew, 357 in the English.
26.
Pardon, verse 26. V'hoyom will be ki yomer aleichem enechem, when your son said to you, Moha avodah zos, what is this service that you're doing? V'amartem, you should say, Zevach Pesach hu Hashem, it is an offering of the Paschal Lamb. Asher posach habotav bnei Yisrael b'Mitzrayim, that skipped over the houses of the Jewish people in Egypt. But nokperes Mitzrayim as botenu yitzil, when he smote the Egyptians and saved our house. Vayikod ha'amay ishtachavu, and the Jewish people bowed down in thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what he says. If you look at this question, Mo ha'avoda azos lachem, in the Haggadah, this question is which son asked the question? If you think about it, which son is this? This is the wicked one. It's correct, right? Because the wise son, what does the wise son ask? A very complicated question. We have testimonies, and we have statutes, and we have things that we understand, things we don't. What are these things that God commanded us? I don't get it. I don't understand it. That's how the Chacham asks. The Tam, the simple one, says Mazos. Don't get it. What is this? The She'enu Yedei Lisho doesn't even ask the question because he doesn't know how to ask the question. And the Rasha says, what is this service to you? So the Torah then says, or the Haggadah says rather, what is the answer we give the wicked son in the Haggadah? Anybody remember the answer wicked son in the Haggadah? Correct, he wouldn't be included. And what do we say? You should do what? Blunt his teeth. And say to him, this is why Hashem did for me when I left Egypt. Leave it alone for me and not to you. If you were there, if you had been there, you would never been taken out of Egypt. That's the answer we have in the Haggadah. What's the answer that the Torah gives us? And you should say, this is a Paschal Lamb, Asher Posach Abodim Bnei Yisrael b'Mitzrayim, that jumped over the houses of it. The answer seems very civil over here. There seems to be a very big difference between the answer that the Torah is giving us and the answer that the Haggadah gives us for the Rasha. So the question is, why are we giving a different answer to the Rasha than we're giving in the Torah? Why is the son not deserving the answer that the Torah gives? Yeah, do you understand the question? Yeah? So Rabbi Yerucham, who was one of the Musar greats from the last generation, says something very important. And this is in general a very important thing. For many years, when people ask questions, they might have been shot down. A treifa question. Now, have you ever heard of a treifa question? You know what a treifa question means? That's a question that heretics ask. What kind of question is that? How do we know there's a God? How do we know that he split the sea of reeds? How do we know that he gave the Torah? How do we know that there's schar v'onish, that he gives us reward and that gives us punishment? These are good questions. Any thinking person should ask such a question. It's not a bad question.
Because there's a good answer for it.
Pardon? There are good answers for it. Right? So any thinking person would be wrong not to ask the question. And yet, the Rasha asked the question, what is this service that you're doing? And we shoot him down. What's wrong? He's asking a question, right? Why can we not give him an answer? Somebody's asking you a question in general. Imagine if somebody asked you a question and you went, what was it? Do you remember the thing that happened with Trump? There was a story that happened actually with Trump a few months ago. Trump was going through a difficult time at a press conference, and he wanted to get an easy question. And there was a frum fellow there, a guy called Turks. They call him Turks. I'm not sure what his first name is. I'm not sure his name is Turks. It might be a longer name, but they call him Turks. He reports for Ami magazine. And he was there at the press conference, and the people that are advising Trump, they saw one frum guy. They figured, this guy's easy. They asked him something. And he asked something about anti-Semitism. And for some reason, Trump thought that this guy was accusing him of being an anti-Semite. Now, I don't think Trump's an anti-Semite. I don't. But for some reason, he understood from the question, he says, what are you going to do about anti-Semitism? I don't know exactly what the question was. But Trump took it really, really badly. And because he took it really badly, he lashed and laid into this guy like really seriously.
Like he does, yeah.
Yeah, like he does. But publicly, in front of everybody, this guy says, there's a problem with anti-Semitism in America. What can we do to fix it? I'm not an anti-Semite. How dare you call me an anti-Semite? I got Jewish grandchildren. He's going on. And I was like, what was that all about? Yeah. It was, and truth be told, it's a fair question. Even if Trump was an anti-Semite, it's a fair question. What are you going to do about it? Yeah, it's an issue. Something we should ask Corbyn. What are you doing about anti-Semitism? There's no such thing in our country, right? Whatever. You know, that's a separate discussion.
Not in the Labour Party.
Pardon?
Not in the
No,
Labour
not in the Labour Party. Definitely not. It's definitely not endemic. It's not in the Labour Party. Nobody even knows what anti-Israel anti-Semitism is. They all love it. They all love it. Whatever. Right? But we all know that's not true. But this guy asked the question, and when he asked the question, instead of getting an answer, Donald Trump jumped down him and absolutely ripped it to shreds. And this seems to be what we're doing with this Russia shows up. He's sitting by our Seder. He says, can I ask you a question? Go on. We love questions. What's all this stuff that we're doing? You're a heretic. You dare ask you that question. If you were in Egypt, you would have never been taken out of Egypt. Hey. Go easy. And the Torah gives us an answer. The Torah gives a decent answer, and we don't give a decent answer. So that's very difficult. Why aren't we giving a decent answer to a question that the Torah gives us an answer for? We should be encouraging him. Right? So says Rabbeinu Yerucham, there is nothing wrong with the question. And we can see that there's nothing wrong with the question, because if there was something wrong with the question, the Torah wouldn't raise the question. But the Torah raises the question, the Torah gives us the answer. That means that intrinsically there is nothing wrong with the question. What's the problem? The problem is the questioner and how he's asked the question. The question is okay. It's how you ask it that makes all the difference in the world. You know, it's interesting. Just this Motzei Shabbos, I was on a panel for education, for chinuch. And I often say, I'll be the first to say, my oldest is 13. I am in no way, shape, or form an expert on education. You know, maybe my wife does a good job. I try whatever I can do. The fact that my kids turned out good so far, I'm not taking any credit for it. I can't. Baruch Hashem, I thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu every day that this is how my kids turned out. But it might not be to do with me, but the question was asked there. How do you know if you have children and children that might be a bit lax in certain observances? This is a question being asked to a frum crowd. So we assume that the children will be Torah observant. But what happens if you have children that are lax and Torah observant? When do you know that you're dealing with an endemic problem? And how do you know that maybe it's not an endemic problem? It might be something just, you know, he can't be bothered at the moment. But it's not really as big an issue as you make it out to be. And I always thought to myself that the answer that I think is the following, and you can disagree with me on this answer. But I said there's a very big difference. You know, sometimes you wake up your kid, you're trying to wake up your kid for Shachris, and it's 7 o'clock in the morning, he's not getting up. So I said, I'll tell you the honest truth. I struggle to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning also. Maybe I should go to sleep earlier. I wouldn't struggle as much. But if you struggle to get up at morning, a Shachris at 7 o'clock in the morning, it's hard. It's hard to jump out of bed. It's not an easy thing. So if your kid isn't doing it, if you're doing it, well, all right. But in general, you're not doing it either. So why are you down your kid's throat to say, he's not getting up on time for Shachris? I said, what, and you're jumping out of bed? Yeah? Well, you're so much better than he is? Yeah? It's by example as well. But even sometimes in these instances, even let's say if I had a very easy time getting up in the morning and my son had a much harder time getting up in the morning, it's still not a proof that my son has some kind of problem with his Yiddishkeit. He might just be tired. Yeah? Yeah. But when you start getting cynicism, that's when you start having a problem. When you start seeing your kids or somebody else being cynical with you, then you know you have an issue. So somebody comes to you and says, so Rabbi, you really believe all this stuff? Yeah? Do you know what? I'm not interested in having the discussion with you. Why should I discuss this with you? You know, I once had somebody that told me her entire, what she thinks. I said, you know what? I have a lot to add about this one also. She says, I don't want to hear from rabbis. I think rabbis are all chauvinistic. I'm like, all right, then I'm not discussing it with you. I'm not even interested in having the discussion with you. I'm not even going to fight with you whether rabbis are chauvinistic or not. Are they misogynistic or not? I don't care. If that's how you look at the world and that's what you say to me when I'm trying to say something to you, the first time I've ever met you, right? I've not known this woman for years. The first time I met her at a Kiddush and she's going off on one. I'm like, okay. Whatever. You do your own thing. I don't care. But I'm not going to give you an answer. Because if you come to me with that attitude, then I'm not looking to change your attitude. It's just silly.
She didn't want to hear that.
She didn't want to hear what I had to say, and therefore she said, I don't want to hear what... But she was very... Sometimes people don't want to hear what you have to say, but they're very, very polite about it. This woman wasn't even polite about it. They're just like, I'm really not understanding what you have to say. I was like, okay, you don't want to hear what to say? I don't have to say anything. I don't have to prove it to you. Okay, don't want to hear, don't have to. Right? But that's what we're saying. The Torah is telling us the question's okay. We're not bothered by the question. What we're bothered by is the cynicism, the way it's being asked. So if somebody comes and he says, Leon, I want to know, why is it that we have all these things on Pesach? So you can say, look, God took us out of Egypt, He jumped, etc., etc. But if someone says, so Leon, this Pesach thing, we got lots of weird stuff on the table going on, don't we? You'd be like, you know what? I'm not interested in having this discussion with you. I'm just not interested. Why should I be interested? Why should I invest in having the discussion with you when in reality, you're not interested in what I have to say? I can see already from the question you don't want to hear what I have to say. Otherwise, you'd have the question like a mensch. And that's the difference. That's what we're saying. Yes, the Rasha asks a good question. Yes, he deserves an answer. And the Torah tells everybody else who's listening to the question, do you want to know what the answer is? This is the answer to his question. But when the Rasha asks the question and he asks it with cynicism and sneer at you, what you say to him is, you know what? Forget it. Had you been there, you wouldn't have been redeemed anyway. I'm not trying to talk to you. I'm not even interested in talking to you. Forget it. I'm not going to try to change you. People that come to you and say, come on, convince me. Has anybody ever come to say, you know, Leon, I don't believe, but you'll convince me. Yeah? Prove it. And say, prove it. I bet you won't be able to prove it to me. Fine. You're right. You're absolutely right. I will take the bet, and I will bet on your side. Because if you told me I can't convince you, I agree with you. Because you've already convinced yourself that I won't be able to convince you. So I could talk to him, I'm blue in the face. It's not going to make a difference. Yeah? And that's the difference. We allow the Rasha to ask a question if he's asking the question. If he's mocking, then we say, forget it. We have nothing to do with you. That's it for tonight. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for all of you who joined us live. Thank you for all the likes. Please join us again next week.